Bryce Young was benched. Dave Canales, after the game, he said that Bryce Young is his quarterback. Then he came out and he basically said that, yeah, they're going to bench Bryce Young. A lot of things led to this moment. Drew, you predicted a breakout season. Damn. It's going to be breaking the bench now. So
I would tell him he's lying.
What's happening, Drew?
You're a funny guy. I really don't care. They made the right decision.
Would love to say before you continue, this is a terrible podcast for predicting quarterbacks. We all suck at it. I just want to point that out.
Tua wasn't bad.
Yeah, but like we go Bryce, we got Fields. Well, Fields playing good, but we got Trey Lance.
Jalen Hurts was top 2 in MVP. Jordan Love was one of the best. Tua was really great. Purdy was really great. Stroud was really great.
Stroud
was everyone has hits and misses.
Oh, no, our misses though. Zach.
And honestly,
no, it's just the one tweet is cursed.
I mean, the thing is,
that shit is evil. I really am only keeping it up because it's comedy.
It is funny.
It's evil.
I mean, listen, you're not the only one, though. I mean,
not
the
at all.
Scouts had Bryce Young as the number 1 quarterback. You guys were
I wasn't
Bryce
going
Young.
in just blindly thinking, yeah, this guy's it.
He just looks completely different.
At a minimum, be better than last year.
His college tape is one of the most fun you can watch.
And that was an Alabama team. Sorry to cut you off. That was an Alabama team. You didn't have Smitty and Waddle and just first-round pick after first-round pick out there.
No, his sophomore season, the year that he won the Heisman, he had Jamison Williams. Mm-hmm. The year after that, if I'm not mistaken, that was when he was simply by himself. Yeah. And that's when he was really struggling. Or not struggling, but just not looking like the Heisman guy that obviously we saw his second year. But again, I really don't feel a type of way at all. They made the right decision. I respect Dave Canales for this decision as well. He's trying to put it out there that I want to show you. 1, I'm head honcho. I make the decisions here. What I say goes. 2, it is not my fault that this offense is this bad. It is Bryce Young's fault, who's bottom 2 in almost every single statistic that you can look at. I also can look at the fact that he is also understanding our offensive line really didn't play that bad against the Chargers. Really didn't get pressured almost at all. But this guy, Bryce Young, simply was incapable of making good decisions and accurate throws. I don't feel one way or the other, especially for the fact of it was there for him to succeed, where you bring in Deontay Johnson, obviously an improved weapon from what he has had in the past. You go and you spend $100 million on Robert Hunt, although some may look at it as an overpay. Who wants to go to Carolina realistically? You had to do what you had to do. You brought in Dave Canales as well, a pretty solid offensive mind. There were things put into motion to benefit Bryce Young and to put him in a position to play better. Simply didn't happen in these 2 games. Deserves to be benched. Not good. What's next for him? Hopefully he can go to another team and regain his confidence that he once had. Obviously, he lost that in Carolina. I'm not looking at Carolina like they're completely not to blame as well. Obviously, rookie season, you put him out there and you're kind of just blindly trusting that he can just go in there and uplift what you had. Obviously, that didn't happen. There was way too much turmoil, way too bad of a situation for that to occur. But year 2, there was obviously a little bit of improvement, and he obviously has not stepped up to the plate.
So since 2011, there's been 431 quarterbacks qualified, yards per dropback, right? Where do you think Bryce Young ranks?
430th.
How much? What was the number?
431.
He is 431. 427.
He's the worst.
431st. Since 2011, all of the quarterbacks have come in, all of the busts, the Zach Wilsons, the Trey Lance, everybody. Wow. He has been by far and away, I don't actually know it's by far and away, but dead last out of 400.
So you're saying that Madden, I can change his name at this point because he's not going to be in.
Yeah, and for what? That's I don't know. I would switch him a lot if I made that River Brown. I'd
edit him for sure. You know,
9.9 speed.
Keep
maybe.
him 5'9" though.
Yeah,
I gotta go up.
But I think what's next for Bryce Young is tough because when we see a lot of these like reclamation projects, Geno Smith, Sam Darnold, everyone's expecting that or just assuming that. If a quarterback's in a bad situation, if they're in the right situation, they can work out. And sometimes that's true with Geno, with Sam Darnold. Even Baker. That's a great point, Riv. When you have good coaching, when you have good weapons, things work out. But there are way more Zach Wilsons and Trey Lances and fucking David Carrs than there are Geno Smiths. Odds are Bryce Young's never going to be anything in the NFL, right? He was taken number 1 overall. I think even if you argued, right, there was debates with C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, all of these dudes in that top kind of 5 situation. no one had Bryce Young as a second round talent. No one thought Bryce Young was going to go out here and be a backup level quarterback. We knew the situation in Carolina. I guess at the time we thought it wasn't great, but we didn't think it was terrible, right? But we weren't expecting Bryce Young to be this bad. With the weapon situation, with the coaching situation, nothing has helped him up to this point. But Bryce Young also just hasn't helped himself. I mean, he doesn't take any shots down the field. The pocket awareness isn't great. The mobility is fine, but when you take into when everything else takes into account the lack of arm strength, the height issue where you can't see over the offensive line, mobility just doesn't make up for that. And when you look at what he did in Alabama, he was a fantastic prospect, right? Like you mentioned it, he was great. And as I said earlier, it's not like he was getting bailed out by 4.2 speed Jalen Waddle out there and all of these guys that we've seen past Alabama quarterbacks had. He had guys that were like, day 3 type wide receivers or guys that weren't even really going to the NFL. But he just doesn't have, and you mentioned this before, Joel, he just doesn't have a trait that you can latch onto that says this is how we build around him, right? He doesn't have that one thing, whether it's the size, athleticism, accuracy, touch. He doesn't have that one thing that a lot of quarterbacks have, right? Like for Zach Wilson, all of his flaws, and he has a million, just as many, if not more, than Bryce Young. He had an insane arm. He can make basically every throw on the field, very Drew Lock-esque, where his arm is super talented. It's just everything else going on between his ears that really screw him up. But Bryce Young doesn't really have anything of that. Like, at best, he was just average at those traits. So it sucks because when you get drafted number 1 overall, you have these crazy expectations. You're expected to save a franchise. And he was put in a situation that you have a new owner in David Tepper who wanted his hands in everything. He wanted Bryce Young. He wants to pick the GM. He wants to pick the coach. He's in a situation that usually for 99% of teams, if your owner is doing all of that stuff, you're probably not a well-run organization. The only team I could think of is the Cowboys. Who have not had playoff success, but regular season-wise, they've been decent at drafting. They get a lot of wins. Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, they got a good team and all of that. But there's a reason why, Brett Veach with the Kansas City Chiefs are doing their thing. There's a reason why you have football people in place to make football decisions. When you have owners and all of this going on, it just makes things even more difficult. So it wasn't just Bryce, not living up to his standards. There was a lot of other things going on. But when you watch him play football, when you watch the tape, when you watch the film, there was no redeeming quality that you could look at. And I think that's what Dave Canales saw. And I also think this is good news for Panthers fans, right? Because you missed out on Bryce Young. It is what it is. You also have to figure out, is Dave Canales real? Does Dave Canales know how to run an offense? Can he be the head coach of your football team? Because if you let Bryce Young go out there and play 17 games, sure, you might get the number 1 overall pick. This upcoming class doesn't have a dude with Caleb Williams, Trevor Lawrence. Like I saw a mock the other day, Quinn Ewers was the number 1 overall pick. Quinn Ewers is nowhere near those type of guys as prospects. At a minimum, with Andy Dalton, you can see, can this offense be competent with a quarterback who isn't Bryce Young bad, but at least should be able to run an NFL offense?
I have Deontay Johnson in fantasy, so I am brutally hurting at the moment.
You should be thrilled. You should be fucking elated.
Oh, well, now I'm lit. But prior, dude, it was very hard to just look at my team and see a guy have like 4 points. Yeah, it was rough. I think what makes this, and Bryce Young getting benched is definitely tough, especially just as a confidence. His confidence was already low, but like getting benched as a number 1 pick in year 2, in game 2, for game 3 is really, really something quick. It's something that probably shatters your whole reality of what you expected of the NFL. I think what makes this worse though is like when Zach Wilson, you guys drafted him, there was no picks attached. You didn't trade up to get him. You didn't do any of that nonsense. Trey Lance, yeah, but then they bounced back pretty effortlessly, like the Niners. Even like guys like Justin Fields who went pretty high, they didn't really. It was no picks or nothing insane. The haul that went for Bryce Young was so ridiculous. It only makes this move 30 times worse. This is probably the worst trade in NFL history, and this is probably the worst number 1 pick in NFL history. I mean, this is just for the fact that you traded essentially CMC, DJ Moore, Caleb Williams, offensive lineman, I think a cornerback too, and a couple other picks if I'm not mistaken, but a lot of stuff for this one player, and he is literally not about to finish his second year as a quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. He's coming off the bench for Andy Dalton. And I think Andy Dalton at this point in his career is just a journeyman. He's probably a strong backup for a team that has a good starting quarterback. You do not have that. And I think for Carolina, who is trying to direct in that rebuild, you started off your rebuild poorly. You don't have a quarterback, and I think that is the most important part of a rebuild. Not everybody's going to have Chicago where you have a team in place. Now you bring in the quarterback. Not everybody's going to have Houston where you don't have a team, but you brought in your quarterback. It just, even with Jacksonville, they brought in their quarterback. They had a pretty shitty first year, second year essentially bounced back. They also have to figure out their situation because their situation looks terrible too. But with Carolina, they've just failed in all areas. And now you have to look at this situation as, how can we bounce back from it? Yeah, we failed. We take that accountability. What are you going to do with Bryce Young? How are you going to evaluate your next quarterback? Because you missing out on this, you trading as much as you had for this type of player is pretty eye-opening. I mean, for Brian Burns, CMC, DJ Moore, they sent out more picks than they got back. And those are high-level players. Those are players who left and had career years. Well, not Brian Burns, obviously, he just left. But CMC went to a Super Bowl. DJ Moore had the best year of his career. So it's a pretty shitty situation, and you got to kind of look at yourselves in the mirror like, damn, we really make a mistake. And I don't know how you bounce back from it. You can either bounce back from it in a good way or in a bad way. But just for Bryce Young, I mean, this is just a total hit to his career. I remember he was on, what's that football show? If I'm not, what is it called again?
What football show was he on?
It was
what was
him,
it about?
It was him, AR, and they was on. It was their last year of high school, and they were filming it. Mm-hmm. I forgot what it's called, but I just seen it the other day. You went from that. You were pretty much a superstar in high school. You were a superstar in Alabama. You were a walking legend. You had all these goals and aspiration, and had all these expectations. And now you might be a journeyman or a backup or potentially out the league. So this is something that's definitely heartbreak.
Before you go, Joel, I have a question. Because this is something that probably should have happened last year, where you start Bryce Young off the rip, and obviously the situation wasn't...
Tom Brady talked about this.
Did he?
Yeah, he talked about this.
Why didn't Andy Dalton start all last season? If now it's in a situation where you forced your hand and you had to sit Bryce Young down, now his confidence is shot. When he gets another opportunity, he's obviously going to be thinking, there's a chance I can sit down if I don't play at the highest of levels. If they would have taken that approach, obviously 3 years in college, is a Heisman winner in that time period, gets drafted, goes to Carolina. Their best weapon's a 33-year-old Adam Thielen. Why not just put in Andy Dalton, who you brought to the team to be a veteran for Bryce Young? Why not start him, give Bryce some time to sit and learn, as opposed to what has happened now, where I respect Canales for at least admitting he's not ready to start. He's not meant to be a starting quarterback in the National Football League right now in 2024.
A year too late.
I think that's a valid point, and I do think that NFL organizations rush out quarterbacks too quickly nowadays, and we're seeing what development could do with a Jordan Love case study, Patrick Mahomes case study, and I think J.J. McCarthy is going to be one of those guys up next because I think he's going to play really well when he gets a chance.
Drake May in that conversation too.
Drake May also is sitting to start the year. I think the first thing that I come to terms with this move is that this was an organizational failure from top to bottom. I'm going to get into the organization first, and then I'll get into Bryce Young. I think there is something to be said when Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield were in your building. They both failed miserably, and now they both look really good. Baker Mayfield has had a full year of that, but even Baker Mayfield, as a rookie, went to an 0-16 team, went 6-7, and threw for 24 touchdowns to 17 interceptions, I believe. So Baker Mayfield, even as a rookie, was really damn good. Or I think it switched around. It was 27 touchdowns to 14 interceptions. So Baker was good. He was just unhealthy in his down seasons. Sam Darnold, it's a wait and see this year. David Tepper is the worst owner in the NFL. The fact that he forced, because I think this is what happened, I think that he forced the staff to take Bryce Young.
He did.
I think that Frank Reich was hell-bent on drafting C.J. Stroud. I think that was going to be the pick if Frank Reich had it his way. But David Tepper got involved. David Tepper got involved when Cam Newton had a shoulder injury and he felt like he was losing the locker room, and that's why Cam Newton was benched as well. David Tepper gets involved in football decisions. The situation of the Panthers is one of the worst in the league. It's hard to ask any quarterback to go in and succeed when you are the number 1 overall pick, and I remember doing this exercise with you guys when Bryce Young was heading into the league, I said, if you look at the last 10 quarterbacks that were drafted first overall, Bryce Young, from an attribute standpoint, is the most underwhelming one by a landslide. The person right in front of him was Jared Goff. And I think Jared Goff has more physical traits. He's 6'4", he has a strong arm than Bryce Young. Bryce Young was just an underwhelming first overall pick. And when I look at his skill set and what he does on the field, there is nothing you can latch on to. He had 18 completions for 84 yards. Adam Thielen was wide open. Bryce Young had a clean pocket, and Bryce Young ran into a sack by rolling out. Bryce Young takes sacks that he's not supposed to take. The Panthers were in field goal range. They're at the 36-yard line, and the first read wasn't open, so Bryce Young rolls out. That's good. And instead, he's looking down the field trying to make a play, but nobody's open. And instead of throwing the ball away, he takes a sack that knocks the Panthers out of field goal range. And Robert Hunt is there with his hands on his head like, man, what are you doing? If Dave Canales didn't bench Bryce Young, the entire locker room was going to be out on him. Because let's just be real. If the last 2 games that Bryce Young had, from a statistical standpoint, if Brock Purdy had those same 2 games when he first got a chance to start with the Niners, granted, different situation. I understand the Niners are a stacked team, but just take the situation away. From a stats standpoint, if any quarterback that is not a first-round pick has those games back-to-back, they're not playing. They are going to get replaced. Bryce Young shouldn't have had a long leash if he keeps playing this poorly. And Dave Canales deserves a lot of credit because I do believe that with Andy Dalton in the offense, this offense is going to get some first downs. This offense is going to look workable. I don't think it's going to be one of the best offenses. I don't think it's going to be one of the worst, though. The Panthers, through the first 2 games, have a 25% success rate on offense. The only team that has been as bad through the first 2 weeks were the 2002 Texans, an expansion team with a rookie quarterback in David Carr. Yes. David Carr. That's how bad it is right now. And we talk about Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield, but Bryce Young doesn't have a great arm. He doesn't have great athleticism, and he's a smaller quarterback. Quarterbacks that are short, it's an outlier for them to succeed. Kyler Murray is different. I mean, he was a first-round pick in baseball, too. He's just an elite-level athlete. Russell Wilson has one of the best deep balls in NFL history for a guy his height, and just in general, Russell Wilson is that good, and he had elite athleticism at his prime. Drew Brees was elite from an accuracy standpoint and reading the field and diagnosing coverages. Bryce Young doesn't have any of those traits. And the trait that got him drafted was the playmaking ability, but he is not athletic enough to evade defenders at the NFL level in the same way that he was able to in the college level. Now, the one thing that you could give him grace for is that it's clear that his confidence is shot. It's clear that he's probably going through one of the most difficult moments in his life, and I feel for him for that. Maybe there is another situation for him where he can rebuild his confidence and look like the player that he looked like in college, but as of right now, playing on the football field is not the best way for him to do that.
Absolutely.
What's up, John?
I'm very glad you let me chime in here because
Bryce Young guy.
This has been brutal. If I could describe the Panthers' offense watching it through
like
2
the
games,
Steelers, right?
it looks like you took an offense from 1949 and then just plopped it into today. And for Bryce, I think you guys all hit it perfectly.
Oh, wow.
His escapability and playmaking from college has not translated at all because he is an average NFL athlete, and the arm strength has been average. But the pocket presence has been a clear indicator that the confidence is completely gone. Some of the sacks he was taking, it was like, dude, just throw the ball away. And he's looked like a broken quarterback for over a year now. And Andy Dalton's going to come to make this offense better. I don't think anyone can deny that. But when you look at the Bryce Young trade, this is going to go down as one of the 3 most consequential moves in NFL history. Not just because of what you gave up, the opportunity cost of Caleb Williams a year after, DJ Moore, Darnell Wright, a good right tackle. I know things have been perfect so far in Chicago, but Tyreek Stevenson was also in that move. But because the Carolina Panthers in the last 2 years have traded DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey, as we have said, and Brian Burns all before they turned 26 years old, and the only first-round pick they got from those 3 players was Bryce Young. And they gave up more first-round picks in the process of making that happen. when you look at the Carolina Panthers, Joel, it is absolute organizational incompetence too, because it's not all on Bryce. I think last year just completely broke him. And then you look at Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold. Since they've left Carolina, those two quarterbacks have been uber productive in multiple different situations with multiple different coaching staffs. And I think all things considered, this is Dave Canales doing the right thing, because if he did not bench Bryce, there was a good chance this becomes the first team to ever go 0-17. That's how miserable. I mean, 6 points a game, 36 points allowed.
6 points against hilarious.
36 points a game allowed. Think about that. Even defensively, things have been completely broken. I mean, their best cornerback, their best player on their defense now that Derek Brown is out, and J.C. Horn is getting torched week to week. So this is his way of trying to win back the locker room and making the most of the situation. Because for Bryce, he's got a lot of flaws. I've lost a lot of my faith in him after these two games, but I think him sitting and resetting is going to be the best thing for him and the Panthers moving
And
forward.
it's tough too, because you go on Twitter and people are like, Bryce Young should go here, Bryce Young should go there. Unless Bryce Young is going to a situation where you have an elite play caller, you have elite offensive options, and you have a decent offensive line, it's not going to work. Like I saw, look, the MFL football, whatever, that big account is like, the Giants should go out and trade for Bryce Young. I'm like, are we serious right now? Like the one thing the Giants need right now is or the one thing Bryce Young needs right now is the New York Giants. Like, I think it'd be a great, you mentioned on BR, Joel, like, if you want to go be a backup for Brock Purdy, be a backup for Tua, get in an offensive system that has creative play calling and has some good offensive weapons, and when those quarterback goes down and you have to start for a game or two, and maybe you could be efficient and be accurate and kind of get your mojo back, get your swagger back, then go in free agency in a couple of years and see if you get a 1-year deal with another hopefully offensive-minded head coach with some weapons there. But to try and go somewhere where you could potentially be a starter probably means that team isn't very good, probably means you have either a first-time head coach or a head coach that is on a hot seat or not that great. He just needs to go to a situation where he could chill, be a backup, be in a good system with a good quarterback room and a good offensive staff. Don't try to go out there and just flip it on its head and be like, yeah, let's go be the head coach, or let's go try to be the starting quarterback for the Vegas Raiders or for the New York Giants, where it doesn't feel like it's going to work that way.
It'll be interesting to see who ends up making a move for Bryce Young, because we see that great play callers, they take swings on guys. I mean, the 49ers had Trey Lance, but they brought in Sam Darnold to compete for the backup job, and then they let Trey Lance go, and Kyle Shanahan was a fan of Sam Darnold. Once Sam Darnold became a free agent, look who signed him, Kevin O'Connell, a great play caller. If one of these guys picks up Bryce Young, it'll tell us how they feel about him, that they think that they can maybe fix him. If none of them pick him up, I think it's also telling us something, that they aren't very high on the talent that got him drafted first overall.